Okay, welcome back, guys. I said I probably wasn't going to do another video, but I was bugged because I have asks that I didn't get to, and I would like to at least get through the ones that I have, and then any that build up between now and the end of the year, I can do next year. So I really am going to try to blow through these and not ramble too much. I mean, obviously, no promises, but I'm going to do my best. So let's just dive in. Daryl Dixon just wrapped up filming, and EK suddenly comes back to post the most on her story she was in a while. Interesting. Yeah, it is interesting because that keeps happening. Like when they're on break or when they've wrapped filming, she is much more present on social media, and then when they are known to be filming, she's much quieter. So obviously, it's not proof of anything, but it is definitely suspicious. So thank you for that. All right, so I just recently decided to go back and rewatch them, 510, as I joined Team Delusional back in June. Oh, welcome. And I wanted to see for myself all the scenes everyone talks about during this episode. Well, I noticed when Carol hands Daryl Beth's knife, she says, "We're not dead." She was quoting something Daryl had said previously, but still, could this be a slight hint to Beth? Yeah, I mean, definitely it could be. As we always talk about, they make it make sense in the plot. So the obvious thing is that she's saying, even though Beth died, even though you lost her, we're not dead. Like, we don't, I don't want you to die. I don't want you to lay down and give up, that sort of thing. But yeah, I mean, I think that the writers use word choice specifically in the dialogue to give us hints all the time. So you could definitely see it. I mean, the fact that she had Beth's knife, the fact that she has been a parallel to Beth often enough, right? That could definitely be a hint. So no way to know for sure, but I do really like that idea. So thanks for sending that in. I don't understand why they're waiting this long to bring Beth back. What is the reason for all the symbolism and callbacks if she didn't return during the main show or during his spinoff? It doesn't make sense. If she's not back in S4, I'm done. There's no reason for it to be this long. Yeah, I mean, there are plenty of reasons, and I've talked about them in depth before. I think it's mostly logistical. It's not so much because they don't want to bring her back yet. They have story to get through, and I think that there are legal things on the backside that we don't always see that have to do with um, business decisions, the spinoffs, streaming rights, all of that, and that's why it's taking so long. But as we always say too, it talks about his happy ending. So at the beginning of the series, so until he gets that happy ending, I'm gonna hold out hope because I think it's her. And if we haven't seen him get his happy ending yet, then we haven't gotten there yet. So not until they show him settle down in the long term with somebody else. If that ever happens, then I'll give up hope, but I don't at all think that that's going to happen. I think it's going to be her, and I think that we will either see her or some sign of her that's really obvious by the end of season 4. So there has been talk about them cutting it short, that maybe originally it was going to be 5 or 6 seasons for Daryl Dixon, and because they seem to be pushing back toward the reunion show, funneling all the characters back into one, new flagship show, that it might have gotten cut off because of that. So maybe we won't see as much of Beth in the spinoff as they originally planned, but that doesn't mean that they're changing the story. That just means that they're changing the vehicle through which they tell the story. So I understand your frustration. Everyone's frustrated. We wish that she had been back 9 years ago, but I just can't in good conscience give up hope because there's too much evidence to the contrary. So I feel you, but there's going to be a lot of us who are going to keep hope until we either see the show end, I mean, 100% the entire TWD universe, or see him settle down with someone else who is clearly being shown as his soulmate. And right now that has not happened, and everything still points toward that happening in the future, but it being Beth. So okay. I was thinking about possible relationships for Beth to have during those 10 years of absence. And I was wondering, what if they do a parallel between Beth and someone to Daryl and Isabelle? Beth meets a guy, they get together, however, they don't fall in love, but they could have, had they been given more time. He has a child, not Beth's child, but a kid of his own. And when he dies, he tells her to look after his child no matter what. Obviously, Beth would have done this anyway, though. This could parallel Daryl and Isabelle, and how when she died, she told him to take care of Laurent. Yeah, I think that's very possible. And I've always kind of had a headcanon of Beth taking care of many children, multiple children. And, obviously in 10 years, she did not give birth to like 14 children or anything like that. So I kind of feel like maybe none of them will be hers biologically, and they will all be, things like this that Either someone she knew and so she took over care of their children, but it also could be that she just kind of collects um, orphans and misfits. And this goes back to something she told Michonne in season 4 when she was talking about how, um, you have words like widow and widower, but you don't have a name for a parent who loses a child. And I mean, that's not exactly what we're talking about here because we're talking about her having children who lost their parents. But it's almost like a hint that, something about children and lost children and that she will be involved in that kind of storyline. And other than taking care of Judith, she really wasn't in season 4 and 5. So that's yet another thing that they set up with her that has yet to be paid off. But because of all you had the Jocelyn story with Michonne in season 9, I think. And even though Jocelyn was evil, I felt like she was an anti-parallel to Beth. Like that is a parallel to Beth, except Jocelyn was evil and obviously Beth will be good. Um, so you had that, and then you had I want to say her name was Lou in was that season 1 or season 2 of Daryl Dixon, who had all the children at the school, and it was kind of a Wendy and Lost Boys kind of vibe. And that I think too was a parallel to Beth. So because of that, it just reinforces that she's going to be taking care of children, maybe a lot of children. But I mean, yeah, this is definitely going to parallel um, Daryl. They really started the parenting thing with him back with Lydia, and parenting like a teenager kind of a thing. And then of course Laurent was younger, and we've never seen Daryl like parent a baby necessarily, other than I guess we saw him taking care of Judith when she was little, but even that it was like for short amounts of time. It wasn't like him actually parenting a child that was a baby. But I do think that his conversations with Aaron about that, Aaron and him had a conversation where Aaron said, well, you are a good parent, but you just got to skip the exploding diaper phase. And I feel like at some point he's going to have a baby and he's not going to get to skip the exploding diaper phase. So anyway, all of that is just foreshadowing. So yeah, I think you 100% are right about this, and that very well they could do a really strong parallel there between Beth and whoever, and that would parallel Daryl and Isabelle. And I mean, we've seen this before. We've seen clear back at the Sanctuary, that was paralleling her Grady arc. And now in Daryl Dixon season 4, we know that he's going to possibly be taken hostage again by this military group, and there might be a medical aspect involved. So they're kind of doing it again. They've definitely paralleled Beth and Daryl's arcs before. So yeah, it just makes sense that when we get her story, she will have gone through a lot of the same experiences Daryl has, but in her own way and time. So yeah, totally agree. We're on the same page. Okay, hi again. I just have a little interesting news to share. I had commissioned a cameo from Emily back in October where she sang me the new song, Stephen's Weed, from her upcoming TWD album. And at the time, she said she'd be releasing it at the end of November to promote her TWD EP coming out in December. Well, fast forward to now, and that song was never released. And she now released a TikTok video saying that the EP won't be coming out until some undefined time next year. The delay is very interesting to me because according to her, at various points this year, she stated that the EP is basically done. Why is she delaying it further? I always thought the time of the release of this EP was suspect since it's been so long, and I thought she was waiting to release it to coincide with some kind of return to the show. This, along with a few other speculations, makes me think there was supposed to be some kind of Beth reveal at the end of season 3, but that for some reason they decided not to do it yet. Yeah, I mean, I agree. This is really, the timing of the album is really suspicious because she's been talking about it for a long time, and people even wondered why do it. Obviously to us it's because we think she's coming back, but other people were like, why do that now? Why release all these Walking Dead kind of things now? It's been so long, and so it's been kind of suspicious from the get-go. Um, yeah, and the only thing I can say is that if it changed, it might be because they suddenly decided to go back to the mainstream show. I mean, I don't know about you, but I could just feel it, like something shifted. And they were like, oh, now we're doing this. And I've talked about this before. I think it might be some sort of legality where they thought they were going to have to wait longer for whatever reason. I don't know what it is. Hopefully they'll tell us eventually. It always seems like when things like this happen, it takes a year or two for them to come out and say, oh, this is why we did this. So I think we'll learn eventually what it is, but it's probably something legal, something contractual. And then they realized that it no longer applied or it changed or whatever. And so they went, oh, well, we can do the flagship show and put them all back into the flagship show now. And so that's why they suddenly announced that this is the last season. And I don't know if they've announced that Dead City 3 is the last one, but I suspect it will be. Possibly they could give us a 4, but I don't know. I feel like they're all moving towards something different now. And so if that's the case, it could be that she was going to release it at the end of season 3. And then they said, okay, wait, because things are changing, let's wait and release it next year. And I feel like that's kind of what's happened all along the way with Beth's arc. That last, or one of those asks I already answered, why it's taking so long, because things like this keep happening. And then they do have better ways to do it, or legal reasons they need to wait. I'm sure it's all legit. It is frustrating to us that it's taking so long, but that's just kind of the way it goes. So yeah, I agree. I think that there's a possibility that at the very least, she obviously was planning to release the album at the end of this year, and that changed. So it could be that other things changed too. Very, very possible. So I agree. And thanks for letting us know that. I didn't realize that she had actually addressed that it wasn't coming out till next year yet now. But I'm glad that we know that. All right. Timeline question for you. I've been rewatching S4 and 5, and I just can't seem to get a good read on how many days or weeks pass in that window. I think it's pretty universally agreed on that S4 starts almost 2 years into the outbreak. Lori had 9 months of pregnancy, and baby Judith looks about 9 months old in season 4. So give or take a couple months, we land at 2 years. Please let me know if you think or know different. But the first half of season 4 seems to take place over the course of maybe a week with the illness. Then things get messy. How long do we think Beth and Daryl were on the road together versus how long was he with the claimers? How long was she at the hospital before the failed trade? I see some timelines saying all of 409 through 508 took place in just over a week. I know everyone's clothes change from summer to winter, but that kind of happens every season as Georgia gets colder halfway through filming, and they have to consider the actors filming outside so much. Would love to know your official timeline if you have one. I've gone over this a few times, and I'm probably not going to get it all right off the top of my head because I haven't looked at it in a long time. In terms of the season 4 being about 2 years, I think that's roughly right. Like you said, give or take maybe a few months. So yes. And I do think that 4A is only about a week. Sometimes it feels longer than that, especially because we get the flashbacks of the governor. But remember that the flashbacks of the governor happened like over the previous 8 months or whatever it was. So that's not part of the current timeline. However, 4B, it's pretty much understood that at least several weeks passed. It might not be months and months, but I mean, you say it does get cold in Georgia. I understand that. But at the same time, it doesn't usually get so cold that the actors are going to be in danger of, being too cold if they have to film a scene that is meant to be in the summer. So it's more like, I understand it gets cold, but, and they do tend to wear, heavier clothes. Like that's true, but it's because it doesn't interfere with what they're going for in the show. So if they really needed something to be in the dead of summer, they would just have them, take off their coats and put on their summer clothes for filming, and then they would have coats on set for them that they could wear in between takes. You know what I mean? And that's generally what actors do. So, I mean, I don't think that we should assume that they're wearing heavier clothes because they have to, or else the actors are going to be in danger of being too cold. Like, that's not really a thing. Like, the show would take precautions, of course, to make sure that the actors are safe and that they're comfortable. But if they needed a scene to look like the middle of summer, they would still film it that way because that's their job, right? So the fact that we have in still, we have Beth and Daryl, it's obviously in the heat of summer. I mean, they're both wearing sleeveless shirts for a lot of the time. They're sweating a lot. It just seems to be really, really hot. So that feels like it's still in the midst of a Georgia summer and maybe the end of the summer, but that's the hottest part of the summer is the end. Then when we switch to Alone, I mean, first of all, it just doesn't look as hot. We don't have the sun beating down on them in the same way. And, they can accomplish that by shooting at different times of day so that it doesn't look like they're, in the hottest part of the day. But again, that's intentional. And then we have, of course, their clothes, which are a lot heavier. They're both specifically wearing not only long sleeves, but like jackets. So I think he's wearing a jean jacket and she's got her sweater, her chevron sweater. So it's clear that they want us to understand that it's colder for the characters. So it's understood that there were at least several weeks that passed. If you think about it and I don't know exactly what the seasons, how they correlate with months in Georgia, but if like still happened in August during the hottest part of the summer, then Alone was weeks later, probably as it had started to turn to fall and started to turn cold. So I think we have at least a few weeks there, but they are not specific on how many. Another way that we know that has a lot to do with when Rick and Michonne and Daryl all come back together. via the claimers and everything because it seems to have been a long time. Like to us, we've been watching the show the whole time and we see all of the characters. Maybe an episode goes by where, you don't see Rick in that episode, you don't see Daryl in that episode, but we're seeing them all. So we're used to seeing them, but when Rick and Daryl look at each other, they are both shocked to see one another. And that tells me that they haven't seen each other in a while. And so it's odd. And, they come back together. And I think at that point, it's been weeks, possibly a month or two since they last saw each other. Um, I will say, and this is probably an unpopular opinion, but a lot of people really hone in on what Joe Claimer says about it being New Year's Eve and that they think that that actually is New Year's Eve. And I'm just not sure I agree with that. Saying something like that, it can be a figure of speech. He's talking about celebrating because they have been trying to find and kill Rick for a long time because when he escaped out of the bathroom from the Claimer's house, he killed one of their people. And so they've been looking for him to try and find him and, exact justice or revenge or whatever for their comrade that he killed. And so to me, that was always more about them being excited to finally accomplish that. When people say it's New Year's Eve, I mean, sometimes it's literal, but a lot of times they're just talking about celebrating. It's kind of like saying, oh, it's your birthday, even when it's really not. So that's the way that that strikes me. But there's a lot of people who think that it literally is New Year's Eve and that was put in as a timestamp for us. And, maybe it was. The fact is we don't know either way. But it was kind of an odd thing to put in there. If they're going to put something in for a timeline stamp, why randomly say New Year's Eve? It was kind of strange to me. But that's the point, is for them to be vague and to make us think about it. So I guess it could go either way. Anyway, so then we don't know how long Beth was at Grady in 5A. It really could have only been a week. It doesn't seem like it was that long. But at the same time, we aren't told for sure. We don't know how long they were looking for her. I mean, at any point, there could have been more time that was unaccounted for that they just aren't telling us about. And especially because there was a lot of, those missing scenes where she was seen driving in the Grady parking lot and things like that that we didn't see. Now, those might be from the missing 17 days, so they might not be something that we want to add into the 4A timeline. But then again, they might be. So it's really unclear. From what we saw, it does seem to be that she was only at Grady for like a week, not very long, right? So just keep in mind that we don't 100% know that for sure, but it could be. It definitely could be. Let's see, what else have you got here? So I guess that's pretty much what you asked is what the timeline is in 4 and 5. So it seems like I just don't remember for sure. I'd have to go over it again. By the time Rick disappears, and then we have a 6-year time jump, right? Up until that point, from like the beginning of the show until he disappears, I want to say it wasn't very long. It was only 2 to 3 years. And I just don't remember exactly what the number I came up with was. But any number that we come up with, again, we just aren't 100% sure on it because they are so vague on the timeline. But overall, yeah, I mean, seasons 4 and 5, it didn't take that long. And at least it doesn't seem to. I think it's more than just a week for 409 to 508 for sure. I think it's more like a few months. But if each season was only a few months, I mean, one of the biggest time jumps we had that was confirmed in the show was between 3 and 4, and it seems to be the turn of a full season. I don't even think that was a full year. I think it was like 8 months. But other than that, we didn't have many time jumps. So if we're only talking about a few weeks to a few months per season at most, then yeah, I mean, Rick disappeared in season 9 into the CRM, and at that point, it was only supposed to have been like 3 years into the zombie apocalypse or thereabouts. Then we get the 6-year time jump, and since then, we've had a few more years. So anyway, it works out to where it's been about 10 years since Coda. But specifically for 4 and 5, I mean, trust me, back in the day, there was so much debate about how much time had passed and people getting pretty passionate about what they believed. So I would say that it's somewhere in there, but more than a week, but not more than a couple of months probably. So I hope that helps. I kind of rambled a bit, but I hope that helps you get a little bit clearer picture of the timeline. And beyond that, we just have to wait until they confirm more and give us a little more, which I honestly think that once we get the missing 17 days, that will clarify a lot. But yet again, we are waiting for that still. All right. Just a couple of things. Hello and happy holidays to you. You too. I think you've hit on a good point that the reason for the series spin-offs has been to keep TWD relevant to fans. Those of us who are originals to the fandom and started watching when the series premiered on AMC rather than on the streaming services later on probably remember the announcement of TWD full-length feature films. Yes, I do. Those didn't happen for whatever reasons, but the purpose was probably the same, to keep TWD relevant to the fans. I can understand that fulfilling the promised romance arc for Daryl would be a great incentive for fans to renew their viewership when the flagship show is reinstated. However, the powers that be missed so many wonderful storytelling opportunities by waiting so many years to bring Beth back. Anywho, one of the big things to me, which has kept me on TD for so many years, is Enid's wardrobe in her introduction scene in JSS Just Survive Somehow. Unless apocalypse fashion trends for young ladies include faded yellow tank tops over grungy gray tank tops, shorter length jeans with some sort of cuffed socks, boots, and beaded bracelets, the almost identical outfit as the one Beth was wearing when she left the prison had to have been intentional. Or they were too cheap to make a thrift store run for more grungy clothes. Granted some subtle differences. Enid wore hiking boots rather than cowboy boots, earrings instead of a necklace. I needed to try to make those out. And a purple jacket taken from a walker rather than a gray sweater. The 90% identical outfit, along with the episode emphasizing survival, has always really stuck out to me. She's an older teen girl. They could have put her in hipster jeans with her favorite alternative rock band tee, Air Jordans, anything, but that was chosen. Just my rambling 2 cents. Take care. No, I like it. I really do like it because of all the reasons you said. And you could argue the budget thing maybe in the first season, when they were still establishing themselves. But by season 5 or 6, I mean, season 5 was the height of viewership on cable when it was on cable every week. I don't know if they're honestly, they might have gotten more viewers later on from streaming because people can watch whenever they want. People like to say that it doesn't pull in as many viewers for streaming, and I mean, it's neither here nor there. You have to look at specific instances because sometimes it's true and sometimes it's not. But um, you know, it was cool to watch it all at the same time or within a few hours and see how many people showed up live to watch it. And that's where they would get their numbers saying 20 million people watched last week, and then they can't do that as much with streaming because everyone's watching it at a different time. But that doesn't mean that they aren't getting the same views overall. It just depends. Anyway, so the point is, because that was the height of viewership, there's no way they were like hurting for money at that point, especially to buy something as simple as an outfit for a teenage girl, right? So I don't think we could argue that they were too cheap about it. So that means that's just proof that they did it on purpose, that they were very purposeful in what she was wearing and what the symbolism was. And I 100% agree that Enid was definitely a template for Beth. So totally agree. And yeah, thanks for pointing those details out. That's really interesting. How do you think or hope they tell us Daryl was in love with Beth? After she comes back and we see their relationship progress, show not tell, or have him and maybe Carol have a conversation before she comes back and he admits he was in love with her. I could see the latter being a good way to bring her up after so many years, and it'd put her back into the minds of the general audience. Not that she ever left, but the idea of her as Daryl's love interest. And it would also be a good way for him to finally talk about her. Maybe he wouldn't even directly say he was in love with her, but it's heavily implied. Yeah, we've always wanted him to have a conversation about her, and very specifically, they have not mentioned her name once. I mean, Maggie mentioned her name once, but Daryl really hasn't, and nobody else really has either. And so we've talked about this, a great deal about why they don't mention her, and what the reasons behind that might be. But yeah, I mean, I don't think that I was ever, for a long time, that I was ever really convinced he would have a relation or have a conversation about her before she showed up. But now I kind of am because, I mean, that conversation with Maggie was actually a big reason that I think that now because if you really look at that conversation and especially Daryl's part in it, or rather his lack of part in it, it really becomes very telling. Maggie mentions Beth, and everyone was mad at the time that they didn't show Daryl's face when she mentions Beth. I mean, they show his face other parts of the scene and the conversation, but we do not get his reaction when she says Beth's name. And I think that that is on purpose. They didn't want to show us his reaction because they weren't ready to, make it really obvious yet. And it's also kind of an analogy for the fact that he is still not talking about her to anyone. He's burying those feelings, and so they're not going to show them to us as, the audience. But that also makes me think that it was sort of a template for a later conversation when he will be willing to talk about her and ready to talk about her. And yeah, I mean, I think given how much Carol has opened up to him and the very small way that he opened up to Carol, in the finale of season 3, he's still not quite there yet, but it was a baby step that he's getting there, and he'll get to the point where he can talk about her. And that is also going to be the the evidence that he's finally worked through his grief about her. Not that he's, let go of it or anything, moved on from her or anything, but the fact that he cannot talk about her, will not talk about her at all, shows that, he's still bearing that, and it's still really, really affecting him, and he is not healed from it yet. And I think that's part of what needs to happen before she actually shows up. So yeah, I do think that there's a very good chance that he'll have a conversation with someone. I mean, I kind of hope it's with Carol. It just seems like she's the only one that it would really fit to have the conversation with, and so I kind of think it will be her. And you could even argue that was foreshadowed clear back in them when she gave him Beth's knife. That was a foreshadow of him eventually opening up to her and talking to Beth about her, even though it was going to take 10 years or more because, Daryl's just that stubborn and he buries his feelings just that deeply. So yeah, I agree, and I hope you're right, because this would be really fun to see. But I also think that it's not going to happen until right before she actually shows up. So yeah, I mean, Maggie mentioned her name, and we wanted to hope that that meant that she was going to show up within a few episodes, which clearly didn't happen. But I think, again, that the point is that Daryl was not willing to talk about her. And also they put that in because that was when they were revealing the Leah arc. So it's just another thing that implies, some sort of romance for Daryl, but it's sort of inverted. He was not talking about her, and guess what? Leah was not his true love. But I think that if they are gonna, so if let's just say hypothetically that everything you laid out here does happen, he's going to have I keep saying relationship. He's going to have a conversation with Carol about Beth and talk very candidly about her and how her death affected him and all of that. I don't think they would do that until right before Beth shows up, and it's to prime the audience, So, again, I hope you're right, and I think you will be, but I don't think we're going to see this until they are actually literally within the next episode or two ready to reveal her. So, hopefully soon. But thank you for that. All right. This is my last one. So, sorry if you've answered this before, but I just saw a post with supposedly leaked episode titles for 407 and 408 of Daryl Dixon, The Homeland, and Farewell, My Friend. If this is the case, it feels like we'll finally be getting back to the US, unless the homeland is some kind of metaphor for Daryl's new home being in Europe. I don't know, but the finale is what really caught my eye. Could that be hinting that Carol is dying, or that Carol and Daryl are going to say goodbye to one another for good? Or are we supposed to interpret that as the audience saying goodbye to Daryl? If so, I don't love the implication that we'll never see Daryl again. I think we all assume Norman would reprise the role for a movie or revival series with all of Team Family one day. Worst of all, could they actually be killing off Daryl? I mean, no, obviously I don't think that's the case. Really any of that, but they could be hinting at just about anything here, right? And I think that sometimes they release the titles specifically to freak us out and also just to get people talking about it. So, I mean, literally, this could be anything. The homeland, yeah, I mean, that does, for Daryl and Carol, imply them going back to the States. But, I mean, there's a lot of countries that call their country their homeland. Things like Mother Russia, or French people might call France their homeland. So it really could be anything. And then Farewell, My Friend. I mean, yeah, I get why that would make people think that it's Daryl and Carol saying that to each other. But at the same time, they don't really call each other my friend. You know what I mean? I think that if it was them saying goodbye, it would just be farewell. And that would be sadder, actually. Farewell, my friend almost sounds like something that they would say to someone that they've met in Europe, or that person would say to them. Like, if it was Caudron speaking, he might say, farewell, my friend. And that would be like a normal way for him to speak. But Daryl wouldn't say that to him, and Daryl wouldn't say farewell, my friend, to Carol. Like that would be weird. So I don't think that this is. I do think that they're trying to freak people out by calling it that. And you could be right. I mean, we don't know for sure that maybe Carol will. And people have said Carol will stay behind, that she will die. Personally, I don't think either one is going to happen, especially because at the end of season three, they were all trying to leave together. So why would they suddenly go, now instead I'm going to stay here? You know what I mean? That just doesn't make sense to me. It doesn't jive. And now we do know that there is a reunion show in the works. So that absolutely is happening. And I don't see them not having Carol as part of that. I think she has more story to tell. And they actually said that, right? They said that at Comic-Con, that just because it's the last season doesn't mean that the show is over. There's more story to tell. And they didn't say Daryl has more story to tell. They just said there is more story to tell. So that implies both of them to me. Um, so I don't know exactly what these refer to. We'll have to wait and see. But it doesn't worry me that either Daryl or Carol is going to die, or that I don't think they're going to be splitting up. I think this might be more like farewell to Europe and all the friends they made there, and that might be speaking to. I can see, not that I want this to happen, but I can see maybe Antonio dying or staying behind and Carol saying that to him, farewell, my friend, because he's not coming with her. I can see that more easily than it being Daryl and Carol splitting up. So, once again, we don't know for sure, no way to know for sure, but I'm not worried about that. That's not what I'm thinking it will be. So, not much we can do except wait and see. And I definitely don't think they're killing off Daryl at all. So yeah, they're just teasing us and making us groan because we have to wait longer for season 4 to begin. But that's just what they do. All right, guys. I did get through all of my asks, so this is definitely going to be the last video until next month or next year. But I hope everyone has a fabulous holiday. Take it easy, have fun, and be safe. And I will see you in the new year. Bye.